In November 2007, 4 teachers were given the opportunity of a lifetime.
Absolutely incredible!
A chance to spend a month in Antarctica.
You get up out of your tent in the morning and you've just got this amazing view, beautiful sunshine, mountain range in the background, pretty much white for as far as you can see.
They explored the science.
It's one of the first ever lichens collected at the Henderson Glacier.
And discovered themselves.
At the moment, I'm sort of a bit fed up. There are several things about life in Antarctica which really get on your nerves.
While at home, their students experienced it with them.
I've got a class full of children here. All right. They're dying to speak to you.
This is the story of how they got there and what they brought back for the benefit of themselves and their students. In 1958, Sir Vivian Fuchs became the first person to lead a successful expedition across Antarctica.
Oh, that's rather a good one. Grinning exuberantly at journey's end, Fuchs at Scott Base enjoying first good meal in 36 days.
50 years later, his son Peter is still keen to promote his father's sense of adventure and love of the polar region.
There are countless people I meet who say, "Oh, your father had an enormous influence on my career." And it's really from that the idea of developing the Fuchs Foundation has come, to help young men and women, boys and girls, to have character-forming experiences.
To mark the 50th anniversary of the expedition, the Fuchs Foundation was relaunched to promote the study of 2 subjects Sir Vivian was most passionate about: science and geography. Every 2 years, 4 teachers of these subjects are to be sponsored by the Foundation to formulate a science project and conduct it in Antarctica.
If you inspire your teachers, which is a very good thing, they inspire their students, and everyone around them sees the benefit, and there's a big multiplier.
I'm just preempting if they don't
In 2006, a modern-day explorer, Steve Bull, was commissioned by the Foundation to head up the expedition and to choose from hundreds of hopefuls 4 teachers who could live up to the Fuchs name. Following a rigorous selection procedure 18 months prior to the expedition, 4 people were chosen.
How do you think that went as a way of bringing across ideas?
Youngest of the group is Phil Avery, a geography teacher from Surrey.
I think the first thing that stood out was the fact that this was an opportunity which was right up my street in terms of being a geography teacher, that was to go to possibly, in my opinion, the most amazing place on earth. And the thing that made it amazing was the fact that it's so alien to me. The conditions, the environment, the weather, the fact that so few people have been there, and put all that stuff together, and it's just a place that you can hardly imagine. And if you can hardly imagine something, then that's what I want to go and see.
So that might help you with one.
The second geography teacher to join the team is Ruth Hollinger, based in Sheffield.
I think I'm a bit of a sort of self-confessed geography geek and, you know, a real interest in geography. I love sort of travelling, different people, different sort of places, and I think going to Antarctica is a fantastic opportunity to use my experiences to encourage more other young people to take an interest in geography and indeed science.
13 minutes left. You're doing the steps of genetic engineering.
First of the 2 science teachers is Amy Rogers from Leicestershire.
It's something that I've always had in the back of my mind as a place that I'd like to see, because you hear so much about it on the news and about global warming and climate change and how Antarctica is being affected. And because of all the science that's coming out of Antarctica, it's something that's been on my radar for quite some time. And the chance to actually get there and see it for myself and experience it for myself was something that I really wanted to get involved in. And also it just seemed like a perfect opportunity to try and get pupils in as well, and just to share the experience with them and hopefully to motivate them to just feel a bit more excited about science.
There's supposed to be a gene on the Y chromosome that gives you hairy...
Fellow biologist Ian Richardson from Cambridgeshire completes the team.
I'm fascinated by the challenge of actually making a success of the expedition, you know, of going there, finding out something useful and worthwhile, living sort of successfully out there in really very difficult conditions. So the whole experience is attractive.
With the 4 intrepid teachers now chosen, it will be over a year before they and their projects were ready for the expedition. Before they could even think about Antarctica, they had to raise £10,000 to match the same offered by the foundation.
Very quickly, the project changed from being this incredible opportunity to simply a fundraising exercise. And that's what it was, writing to companies, running little things like giving flowers for Valentine's Day, going to craft fairs and running a raffle, anything I could do. Sometimes I'd go to events and make £80. Sometimes I'd make £3,000 by selling my blog to a company. So some days were rubbish, some days were superb. Should be your duvet, because that's full of feathers, just like your duvet. Things like today, the Crawley Down Village Fair, probably will only make £80, £100, but my philosophy all along has just been to keep it ticking over. It's horrible if the money just stops coming in completely.
And for one member of the team, it was an excuse to get dressed up.
It's been a real slog so far. It's writing lots and lots of letters, not getting very much response, and just really a big effort on time and commitment, trying to get people really aware of what you're doing. And it's been a real slog, but it's been really rewarding as well.
The fact that they have to contribute £10,000 is quite challenging. The fact that they spend 18 months training is quite challenging. Doing all this while still holding down a full-time teaching job. So that's quite some challenge.
But this trip would be no holiday. Because the Antarctic is the harshest continent on Earth, the team would have to be acclimatized, and expedition leader Steve Bull organizes a trip to Norway. But it isn't solely to test the teachers' stamina in extreme circumstances.
The aim of the whole expedition is for them to do science projects in Antarctica that can then be fed back and inspire children in schools. So this Norway trip is the trial of the science projects. We need to make sure that your science projects, that each individual teacher with their individual project generates enough material for you to be working from 10 till 4 in the afternoon. Have you got the right collecting materials, sampling materials, find out what works, find out what doesn't work. Only then will we know that when we get down to Antarctica, that when you're there for 28 days, are those science projects going to be robust enough to withstand up to that?
On arriving in Norway, the team make their way to the Ostedalsbreen Glacier, 60 miles from Bergen, where they will be camping for 2 days and 2 nights. It's the largest glacier in Europe and only accessible on foot. A tough climb over some demanding terrain, a test in stamina for any budding explorer.
They said, oh, it's only a 4-kilometre walk from the minibus up to the glacier. You sort of think, oh, that's just like down the road from my house. You don't sort of sometimes put it in context, and none of us have ever been to Norway before, so I suppose it's just getting used to local terrain.
The trip to Norway is also a chance for the teachers to meet expedition guides Carolyn Bailey and Carl Alvey, who would ultimately travel to Antarctica with them.
You're going to get secondary movement behind that, though, aren't you?
So the only thing about that is that...
Barely a mile into the trek, and Ian, plus Blister, is already in need of their care.
I knew I was reasonably fit, but I was conscious that I just didn't have the spring, particularly of sort of Phil and Ruth, who seemed incredibly sort of outdoorsy and fit, and I did worry slightly that I would struggle to keep up in certain circumstances.
Ian has been a biology teacher for 19 years, and with a family, of all the team, he has the most commitments.
Well, it's difficult. I've never been away from my family for more than a few days, so this is the most substantial period of time I've been away from my wife since we were married. So yes, that's probably at the back of my mind quite a lot.
The expedition to Antarctica is coinciding with his daughter's leaving for university, an upheaval for the family in itself.
that's kind of starting to sink in now, is that it is actually, I'll be away, so Mum will be on her own. But no, I'm just basically really excited for him because he started off doing research before he started teaching, and so it's nice for him to be able to go back to that again as well.
Relishing the trek to the glacier is Sheffield-based geography teacher Ruth Hollinger. She's no stranger to challenges in far-off countries.
I spent about a year of my life on a bicycle cycling from London to the Earth Summit in Johannesburg in South Africa. And if you're going to have an opportunity to sort of have some of those experiences, then you've got to take, you know, the rough with the smooth. You've got to be prepared to endure difficult conditions, being really hot, being really cold, being really miserable, being really happy, and that's what makes the experience at the end of it.
After a grueling 4-hour trek, the teachers reach their destination.
That's impressive.
Jostedalsbreen is a 1-mile-long sheet of blue ice, formed 18,000 years ago during the last ice age. It's to be home for the next 2 days.
Bit odd, you've been stumbling across nice, dry, warm gravel up till now, and then you get on this stuff and it looks as a sort of covering of gravel and dirt and moss, and it looks like it should be really grippy, but it's a tiny little covering. Underneath is just blue ice, really, really slippery. Right, shovel that lot down there, and I reckon
A little tricky too to put up a tent and secure it to the ice, but it's something they have to master, because these are the very tents they have to erect and use for shelter in the Antarctic.
I mean, I would say that camping on a glacier in Norway, it was a bit grim really, because everything's cold and wet. But that's probably a good test, you know, if you can cope with that, then you probably cope more easily with Antarctica.
It's a good job that camera doesn't have smell-o-vision on it, that's all I can say.
Bit of a restless night on the glacier, just really quite solid sleeping on ice, and I've got a thin, well, not thin, this is quite a thick foam mat actually, and although very good at keeping the cold of the ice away from me, it's not the most comfortable thing to sleep on. But I'm just going to get a hot drink on now and then have some breakfast, which, because we couldn't buy any milk on the way in, is cereal with cold water. Lovely. Wait there a second, wait there a second, wait there a second.
As well as being a newcomer to the world of adventure, Phil Avery only became a teacher 2 years ago.
Before I was a teacher, I was a store manager for Boots up in Nottingham. And although the company's great to work for, I enjoyed managing people, the day-to-day underlying thing that I was doing didn't really interest me. So I decided to go back to something that I really enjoyed, which was geography. And teaching was brilliant fun.
Phil's hobby is long-distance running, and it's his interest in the body's endurance abilities that inspired his choice of personal science project he would undertake on the expedition.
My science project came about from reading a book by Dr. Mike Stroud, who walked across Antarctica, ran our finds, and has done many Arctic journeys and lots of other bits and pieces. And in there he talks about doing science experiments on himself and random finds as they walk across Antarctica. And that got me thinking. I said, well, can I do something like that myself?
Phil has devised a method of comparing the weather with how the team are performing and feeling.
The wind speed.
He takes weather readings every hour, then compares the conditions to the data he collects about how the team are coping via daily questionnaires.
It's a bipolar questionnaire, and we can see how things fluctuate. And overall, you've got all these different factors. You'll be able to see how the person's doing overall and what's affected it. So am I feeling happy? Am I feeling calm or relaxed? Am I feeling motivated? And then can we correlate that with what I've eaten, how much sleep I've had, with the temperature that we've experienced today, with how much physical activity we've done today, with how much I've been injured and all that type of things.
Personal well-being was on the mind of one team member as soon as she was picked for the expedition. 31-year-old Amy took up rock climbing to belie her fears of just how treacherous Antarctica can be.
One of my biggest worries was that I'd be falling down a crevasse and I wouldn't be able to get out. I haven't done a huge amount of climbing. Obviously in Antarctica we're going to be roped up together in any dangerous areas, and if we do fall down a crevasse, we need to be able to get ourselves out, potentially. So I started climbing just to really develop those skills.
Amy's science project for the expedition is the study of lichens, micro-plant life that grow on rocks.
They're one of the only things on the planet that has managed to work out a way to live in such an extreme environment. And I'm going to try and see if I can find anything new in Antarctica, because nobody's ever looked in that area before, and it's going to be really, really exciting if we can find a new species. Most of the ones we're expecting to find are going to be in really deep crevices, so we need to try and find a way to try and get them out. And we're just trying to work out what kind of tools are going to be the best and just get a bit of a practice doing that.
You look down here, maybe we could take a
section out there.
Amy's fellow biologist Ian is also looking for lichen, but his project is specifically looking for the microscopic organisms that live within it, called tardigrades.
It's like we've hit a barren spot. Tardigrades are ubiquitous on the planet. They're just hardly anywhere where you can't find them. In Antarctica, there's only about 4 species of these little creatures that have been found. And we don't know which ones necessarily were going to turn up in this sort of environment or in what numbers. So a lot of it is simply, at this stage, seeing what's there and whether it's there at all. This feeble little bit of growth is probably a fairly realistic idea of the sort of thing we might find in Antarctica. So we've got a few mosses growing in the rock here.
However feeble a discovery, it still has to be logged meticulously.
5 metres.
That's at 665 metres. Yeah.
GPS 61 degrees.
Despite Ian and Amy having found very little to study, there is an abundance of subject matter for geographer Ruth.
Node 1's sterile sample.
Her project is looking at holes melted into the ice called cryoconite holes. These are caused by rocks and dust settling on the glacier. The rock absorbs the sun's heat, then melts a hole down into the ice. It is the abundance and distribution of these holes that Ruth is measuring incrementally.
The argument is that as more of these cryoconite holes develop, then they're going to create, essentially if they join together, they'll create rivers either on the surface of the glacier or beneath the glacier. And then when those rivers begin to form, then they lubricate the bottom of the glacier, which actually causes the whole thing to move much more quickly. So it's linked up with issues to do with climate change and global warming. So these are all sterile, and basically what you've got to do is...
One of the main reasons for being on the glacier prior to going to Antarctica is to test the equipment and procedures. And already problems are coming to light.
Here it's practical to open your coat and stuff your notebook down your jacket, but in Antarctica probably not. You're not going to be wanting to undo zips, anything. And here we're quite happy to waggle cameras around and keep them outside for a long time with no protection on. In Antarctica the battery will just drain instantly.
Dealing with such tiny samples, that these gloves that we were thinking of using, we just can't manipulate our fingers well enough to be able to even open the bags or get the samples in. Everything's like you're trying to do it on space or something. It's all difficult.
Despite Amy's rock climbing experience at home, she and the rest of the team aren't prepared for the crevasse rescue training, imperative for anyone visiting the Antarctic.
The scenario is here, somebody's gone down the crevasse, there's the middle person that's holding them, going, quick, help, and the person at the back has come forwards and has set up an anchor, and we're going to start setting up the whole hoist system.
In Antarctica, it is Carolyn who will be in charge of their safety throughout the entire trip.
You know, Antarctica is not totally safe, so we're trying to cover all bases as much as possible, so that if that worst case scenario does happen, they are armed with the knowledge to be able to do something about it. And these guys are really good. They're picking this stuff up really quickly. You know, even if all they can do is set up an anchor and get the whole system safe, then that's a real positive thing. Well done. Well done.
It comes back to the original reason why we selected them in the first place and why they've been so good today, is that we didn't select outdoor education teachers with a slight science background. We've got 4 science and geography teachers with minimal outdoor background, and that's what we need We need them to get the science across and deliver it, which they can do in the field. We can train in that outdoor education slant to it. So no great issues there. You know, it's a slow process, but they all get in there.
Cold and tired, the team leave the glacier and end their stay in Norway with a debrief at the bottom of the mountain.
Is there anything you need to change about your science projects from our point?
A time to iron out any problems before the expedition proper.
It's going to be robust enough.
There was the issue about sort of contaminating the sample site, so if we're tramping over it, how we sort of minimise that and to what extent.
I think it's been fantastic coming away to Norway, to a really different environment. Okay, it's not exactly the same as in Antarctica, but it's just made me realise, I think, a lot about, you know, the basics of looking after yourself and keeping yourself warm, how time-consuming it is to go to the toilet, how time-consuming it is to cook your food, and just doing the day-to-day survival things. So I think I'll probably go back home and I'll have a sort of reassess some of the kit that I've got and be a bit more sort of ruthless with taking out a lot of the things that I'd carted around that I didn't really need.
I actually think the aspects of getting on together as a team is very important. I mean, the nice thing is that, you know, Phil and I are going to share a tent for a month, and you always worry that you're going to drive each other around the bend, you know. And I feel as if we've got on well and we've managed to develop a sort of tent routine. So it's nice to go to Antarctica knowing that we can survive without hating each other within a few hours.
But the expedition to Antarctica is still 2 months away. And as the team head back to Britain, sponsorship and funding for it is still uppermost in their minds. Not least, Ian.
As well as the £10,000 that I've had to raise, I've also got to stand the loss of 2 months' salary and the cost of something over £2,000, £2,400 worth of cold weather gear and other things that I'll need to purchase, and that is very, very tough on a teacher's salary. In conversation with the other 3 who are going, they'd all arranged basically to take unpaid leave, but I think that they're in a very different situation from me, with teenage children, you know, going to university and school, a big mortgage.
But this is not a good time to be having cold feet.
I don't think he realises now the reality that because he signed the participation agreement, he's not only incurring all the costs of his training in terms of food and accommodation, but now we're packing this, he's incurring all the costs of this. The longer he delays, then he'll start to incur the shipping costs. So he's got to find 7,000, but if he pulls out, he may have to find nearly 3,500.
Red, like a red?
On the verge of pulling out, but desperate to make the trip, Ian doubles his efforts in attempting to raise all the money needed.
The scientists of the survey...
Peter Fuchs also comes to his rescue at Ian's auction at school.
£17 I bid, £18. I just felt I had to grit my teeth, resolve that I was going to raise as much money as I possibly could in as many ways as I could to try and cover at least some of my costs and just go for it. Done.
Essentially what I sort of had in mind, and maybe your ideas can sort of shape some of this.
As the expedition departure date looms, the teachers are also keen to develop the enthusiasm of students, both in their own schools and beyond.
Really, for me, a big part was trying to raise awareness in school and in the local area as well about the fact I was going to be away and why I was going to be away, so that when we were actually in Antarctica, people were, you know, following us, because it's much more difficult to do that once you've left. You know, you can explain to students what you're doing, and giving them an opportunity to ask questions and giving them an opportunity to be involved is much easier when you're still here. So that was probably my focus in the sort of 2 months before we actually went.
The night before leaving Britain, and the team meet at the expedition's HQ for final preparations. With them is Ian, whose last-minute fundraising efforts have paid off.
And that's just the same weight.
The actual 4-week expedition, although it's going to be quite physically demanding in the cold and the isolation, they'll be able to cope with that because they've kind of gone through an 18-month training period of determination and working together to get here. So they've done the hard bit, now they've just got to go and make it happen.
The expedition begins with a short stay in Chile, where the team have to wait for good weather before catching their charter flight to Antarctica. It's a chance for them to contemplate their forthcoming adventure and for one last check of their kit. With clear weather, the final leg is flown in an old Russian bomber. Its bomb aimer's window provides a tantalizing glimpse of the continent below. After an uncomfortable 4-hour flight, they finally arrive on the blue ice of Patriot Hills, Antarctica. 600 miles from the South Pole, it would be their first taste of what life would be like at the bottom of the world.
I don't think it meant too many points to imagine what it would be like, because there was always tomorrow's school, or there was a bit of fundraising to do, or there was, I don't know, just something else going on. Never could have imagined it like this, even if I had sat down and thought about it.
In the next episode, life in Antarctica hits home.
13 days since I've washed my hair. It's not a pretty sight.
And their science projects become problematic.
The holes are frozen. You've got to do a lot of digging to get at them.
And they undertake an expedition into the depths of the continent.
There's no wildlife, there's no humans. They've been totally on their own for the best part of 3 weeks in the middle of nowhere.